It's Arkansas week and the Longhorns are headed to a rowdy Fayetteville for our first road game. Let's scout the Arkansas Razorbacks to break down how they operate on both sides of the ball. How is their scheme designed on offense and defense? Which players are a threat and what are the keys to a win? But as always, don't forget to pick up your new hat for the new season at Last Stand Hats. Use promo code TexasHomer, all caps, for 10% off your purchase at laststandhats.com. No time to waste. Let's dive into all things Arkansas. Without further ado, let's get into it. The environment for this game should be electric. Arkansas is a familiar foe from the now defunct Southwest Conference. The last matchup was in 2014 at the Texas Bowl. Arkansas won 31-7. But recently, Arkansas has been in a total rebuild. Since 2017, their highest winning season is 4-8. But there's actually excitement in the air for Arkansas fans. Their hope has been renewed with the announcement of Sam Pittman as the head coach. Arkansas has their first sold-out crowd since 2017. There's no love lost with most teams in Texas, and I expect to see more of the same. The environment is made even more unique by the social and financial factors looming over the season. COVID knocked the world off axis last year, leading many to question if there would be a season at all. After enforcing crowd capacity limits, games last year were mostly played in silence. Nationwide, we are seeing a renewed appreciation for the game, and large crowds are allowed back into the stadium. After a year of concern and isolation, Arkansas fans are ecstatic to watch the game, and they will be loud. On top of that, Texas joined the SEC, and we are waiting on the legal money side to work itself out. SEC fans now have an added interest in watching Texas play a conference member. Arkansas fans will be out in droves, and I doubt our welcoming will be cordial. Arkansas is led by their second-year head coach in Sam Pittman. Pittman is well known in the coaching profession. He's had a long career and tons of stops. Pittman, as a journeyman, has worked as the offensive line coach at Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arkansas, all before becoming the Georgia O-line coach in 2016. Pittman was a top recruiter and his line was a finalist for the Joe Moore Award while at Georgia. Kirby Smart promoted Pittman to associate head coach in 2019, and then he accepted the head coaching job at Arkansas the following year. Starting on a COVID year isn't a fair test for any coach, but Arkansas secured 3 wins and an all-SEC schedule, with a couple games that could have ended with an Arkansas win. Pittman is in a unique spot because he doesn't actually need to win big this season. If Pittman is able to make this squad 7-6 this year, he'll be greatly appreciated. Pittman is looking to show progress, not dominance yet. Go watch press conferences and you'll see Pittman is a no-nonsense, honest guy who appears to embrace reality. An honest approach is what Arkansas needs to climb out of the hole. He understands the task and he's setting the culture. It'll take some time ultimately to see where Pittman ranks as a head coach, but the most important job of a head coach is making the right hires, and Pittman made 2 unique and clever choices to run both his offense and defense. First, let's talk about the offensive side. Sam Pittman tapped Kendall Briles to lead the offense. Kendall Briles is a familiar name to Texas fans. He was the offensive coordinator under his father, Art Briles, at Baylor. He had 1 year in the position before the Baylor scandal departed the entire staff. In 2017, he was Lane Kiffin's offensive coordinator at Florida Atlantic, winning the Conference USA Championship. Then Briles went to Houston under Dana Holgorsen. In 2019, he was Mike Norvell at Florida State. In 2020, Kendall Briles was hired as the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for Arkansas. Briles is a young name making a lot of noise, but it was impressive that Pittman would tap such a young, innovative coach to lead his offense. Briles' offensive philosophy stems directly from his father's offense with Robert Griffin III. The veer and shoot is a modified philosophy borrowing from the famous run and shoot offense. The veer and shoot adds in option routes for the receivers and spread out formations. And there's 2 types of spread offenses. Some spread offenses spread out their receivers so there's much more room to pass. The second version of the spread offense is spread to run. By spreading wide receivers out, you remove defenders from the box, clearing up running lanes inside. Art Briles' offense is ultimately designed as a spread to run team. But this doesn't mean they don't pass, it just changes the reasoning behind why they do. Briles is known for his super wide receiver splits, where multiple wide receivers are right next to the sideline. Doing this puts pressure on defensive backs to widen out. The furthest receiver to the sideline often runs vertical routes, so the cornerback and the safety will have to follow him. The inside receiver then likes to make quick breaks to the inside for easy completions. They want you to isolate the nickel on the slot and double the vertical receiver. When you do that, you leave very very little help near the box, allowing their quarterback and running back to dice you up the middle all day. And the run game is varied, designed with many options and fakes. Arkansas is actively trying to confuse the defense with misdirection. You'll see many option runs behind their quarterback KJ Jefferson and their exciting running back in Traylon Smith. The defense needs to stay disciplined with all the upfront movement and execute their assignment without running off to try to catch a ghost. The amount of misdirection and optionality is compounded by the speed in which they play. At its core, it's a simple, quick system designed for maximum speed. Everyone is familiar with up-tempo offenses by now, but Briles takes that to a new level. Not always, but occasionally Briles goes into hyperdrive. The offense will be sprinting to the line of scrimmage immediately after the play to catch defensive backs and defensive linemen out of position. The hyperspeed tempo wears down defenders, and it causes them to jump off sides trying to time that fast pace. The tempo will be a test of our defense's physical conditioning. I expect to see heavy rotations as well to keep our guys as fresh as possible. And as stated earlier, Briles wants to spread out wide receivers and throw to them early on. Texas will have to adjust by taking defenders out of the box. Once the box is light, Arkansas will begin their tandem rushing attack with the quarterback and running back. Once that works, Texas fills the box once again to stop the run, and Briles starts throwing out wide once again. So now that we know Briles' style of attack, let's see which players can actually make his scheme come to life. KJ Jefferson is starting his first year at quarterback, and he's a dynamic athlete. He's 6'3" and 245 pounds, and he runs with serious power and speed. You will not get KJ down with arm tackles and single defenders. It'll take several players to slow him in the open field. And the run game has always been a staple in KJ's game, as he was never really a pure passer. I call KJ's quarterback style playmaking because he's more likely to gash you in the run game for big yards. Briles uses KJ on designed runs all the time. Sometimes it's just a quarterback draw, but often it's his own read option with his running back. Briles even uses KJ as a lead blocker for the running back due to his size. Slowing KJ's ability running will be a major factor, just as it was with Levi Lewis at Louisiana. If his legs get going, this offense can fully activate. But ultimately, KJ is limited in his passing. Briles' offense requires high completion percentages, and since they move quickly, their routes are often short as well. If you can't consistently hit the underthrows and side throws to the flats, this offensive style doesn't work. KJ is in his third year on the team with several drives last season. His highest completion percentage performance was for 57% against Rice, but his receivers did have bad drops. Simply, KJ has to become a more consistent passer for this offense to win more often. KJ has all the athletic talent in the world. If his mind sharpens and he can be accurate on the quick reads, Briles can make this offense even more formidable. And KJ does have a big arm with no trouble launching it deep. He boasts a solid completion percentage of around 50% on deep throws, which is really good. So he has no issue chucking it up there to one of his speedy receivers to pull down. And those receivers will be key in opening up KJ and Traylon Smith's run game. And I like Arkansas starting receivers. Junior Traylon Burks already has first-round NFL buzz. He's 6'3", 225 pounds, and has that traditional wide receiver build. He's impressive physically and a tier 1 athlete, but his production matches his looks. Burks went for 206 yards and 10 catches against Missouri last year. He went for 100 plus yards in 3 more games that year, ending the season with 50 receptions. Arkansas played Burks in the slot for about 80% of his snaps, hitting him at an average depth of 10 yards. He's a pain on those quick in-breaking routes over the middle. He's commonly found in the flats on short passes to the sideline, and he's sure-handed on intermediate routes, especially in the end zone. Burks boasts an excellent reception percentage of 77% from last season, meaning drops have been scarce. Burks was seen in a boot recovering from an injury from a September 4th pregame report, but he was suited up and playing in the Rice opener. He had 5 receptions for 45 yards in a very quiet game, but I expect an added emphasis on including Burks for the Texas game. Traylon Burks definitely requires attention, and due to this, it'll free up the other 2 options remaining at starting receiver. Arkansas lost their solid number 2 receiver in Mike Woods to OU, so they have reorganized the depth chart. Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys. First up is De'Vion Warren, and he's straight up fast. His smaller 5'10" frame allows him to dart around larger defenders. You'll see him in the return game as well due to his elusiveness. On offense, he lined up out wide and in the slot about 50-50 in 2020. Warren is effective deep, especially in zone coverage where he can find an empty area. Warren can be dangerous in that intermediate area behind the linebackers, and he's been targeted in the end zone from that spot several times. Speed is an integral feature of Kendall Briles' philosophy, and De'Vion Warren fits the profile. Expect to see an added role from a production standpoint. He had 14 receptions last year, and I expect that number to grow. Their final receiver, Tyson Morris, had a sick one-handed grab against Rice that caught my attention. He later scored for them. Rice is in his 4th year with Arkansas, and he hasn't been a feature previously, only having 3 touchdowns in 3 years. He now has a starting spot in the lineup and performed well in the season opener, so we should see more production from him this season as well, especially if Texas is forced to bracket Burks all game. If Texas can play good coverage on their wide receiver trio, then it allows the entire defense to focus on the 2 targets in KJ Jefferson and Traylon Smith. If Burks becomes effective, especially early on, then it will be tough limiting 3 points of attack all game. And tight ends are a common feature lead blocking in the run game in Brow's offense. Starter Blake Kern had 20 receptions last year, used mostly for midfield yardage, only having 1 touchdown. Kern is often utilized in run blocking, and he has decent pass blocking stats. His backup Hudson Henry serves a similar purpose. They sneak away for about 2.5 receptions per game, but they aren't a staple in the pass game routinely. DeMarvion Overshown and Luke Brockermeyer, as well as our edge players, will be tasked with blowing up those lead blocks to get to Jefferson and Smith all game. And finally, we have their running back in Traylon Smith, not to be confused with Traylon Burks. The offense is predicated on a healthy run game at a fast tempo, and Smith provides this service. He's fast, and he can get to the edge on outside zone. He can run up the middle, darting around linebackers. He's had 3 100-yard games in his career, with 1 coming from the previous Rice game. He averaged about 13 attempts per game last year, but that should rise. Traylon Smith has to get going so defenses don't just focus on only stopping KJ. Limit Traylon and you throw a wrench into the entire scheme. But as always, good running requires good offensive lines. Their offensive line has struggled through many coaches and lacked consistency, but they finally have a good position coach and seniority, very similar to our offensive line situation at Texas. Arkansas needs to improve across the board in run and pass blocking. If they can make that jump, their offense will improve significantly.
It sound right, boy.
Center Ricky Stromberg and right guard Ty Clary are top 15 run blockers if added to the Big 12. In pass blocking, left tackle Myron Cunningham and left guard Brady Latham are in the top 15 if added to the Big 12. Basically, the right side of their line is better at running, and the left side is better at pass blocking. Sam Pittman was always an offensive line coach, so I expect added development and focus on the line. Arkansas returns all of their offensive linemen. They are all 300 plus pounds with the proper size to play in the SEC, so we will finally get to see if they can turn a corner. So in summation, our defense has to play strong coverage early to limit the wide receivers from completing easy passes. The wide receivers are used to open up the run game. If they can't pass, they can't open up the run game. If they do have wide receiver success, we will have to devote more resources, making life easier for KJ and Traylon Smith. If the receivers are successful against our defensive backs, then expect to see a varied running attack from the backfield. Our linebackers and defensive line will have to overpower their offensive line to limit KJ. Ideally, we shut down the receivers all game so we can just go to work on KJ and Smith by themselves. But that's just half of the puzzle. Sam Pittman made an excellent hire in former Missouri head coach Barry Odom. Odom first got his flowers when he inherited a Memphis team ranked 117th nationally. In his second year as defensive coordinator, Memphis had improved to the 12th best rushing defense. He was quickly snatched up to be Missouri's defensive coordinator before being promoted to head coach the year after. He was up and down at Missouri, so he was let go as a head coach following a disappointing 2019 season. Sam Pittman immediately hired Odom as his defensive coordinator, and Odom is known for his varied and innovative defenses. Arkansas switches back and forth between 4-down linemen and 3-down linemen. They often use a 4-2-5 defense with 4 linemen, 2 off-ball linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. This is the most popular modern defense with good flexibility in slowing the run and the pass. Texas also employs the 4-2-5 personnel package often, but their 3-down lineman look is the most interesting. Usually 3-down is reserved for longer yardage. Having 3-down players in passing situations allows Odom to drop 8 defenders in coverage opposed to the usual 7. This makes for smaller throwing windows. Due to the zone coverage nature, the defensive backs are looking at the quarterback the entire time, trying to anticipate his throw for an interception. The Arkansas defense had tremendous success with this model early last season, but tapered off as teams were able to figure out what they were doing. And actually, Alabama struggled early in the game last year against Odom before blowing it wide open once Sarkisian figured it out. And this is tricky for inexperienced quarterbacks as well, so we want to limit long yardage laid down passing. And unfortunately, Texas had too many third downs last game, even though we went 10 for 15. Ideally, we do not put Card in too many situations where he is throwing into 8 defensive backs looking for that pass. And their secondary is led by future NFL player Jalen Catalon, a former Texas target we missed on, and he's all over the place on film. He's active in shutting down the run on the edge, he can smack running backs running inside, and intercepts passes all over the field. He had 2 in their opener. And Catalon is the best player on the defense due to his field vision. He has a great understanding of the game and comes flying downhill to make the stop. Hudson Card will actively have to look off safeties all game, or Catalon will read his eyes for the pick. Monteric Brown is their second best coverage defender at the cornerback position. He's in his 4th year with steady improvement each year prior with an interception in Game 1 against Rice. Greg Brooks improved a ton in his 2nd year, and this year he looks to keep raising his stock. Brooks will often be found matching up against our slot receiver. But the strength of the Arkansas team is with the linebackers. Starting linebacker Grant Morgan calls the defense for Arkansas, and he's instrumental in getting them lined up. He's a sure tackler, only missing 7% of his tackles from last season, but he's actually strongest in pass coverage. Grant Morgan would be the #1 graded linebacker if added to the Big 12. He was ejected for targeting in the game, but will return for the full game against Texas. The other linebacker, Bumper Poole, is an excellent hard-nosed tackler who plays with tremendous aggression. He is very poor statistically in coverage, so he's there to slow the run and give some needed edge. Bumper was also ejected for targeting and won't play until the second half of Texas. Hayden Henry is starting due to Poole's ejection. He did very well in the Rice game with run defense and tackling, but his previous seasons leave much to be desired. So we will see how he performs with Poole on the sidelines for the first half. And then we move to the defensive line. Let's look at run stopping first. Overall, Arkansas isn't great with stopping the run. Their highest ranked run stoppers are their defensive ends. Dorian Gerald is the 16th and Trey Williams is the 21st if added to the Big 12. Defensive tackles John Ridgway and Markel Utzley both need to improve their run stopping on the defensive interior. Arkansas brings a lot of twists and stunts to confuse the offensive line, so while they might not be statistically productive, they can still cause issues for our gelling offensive line. But how is the pass rush? They utilized their 2 second-string defensive tackles to bring the rush on passing downs. Defensive tackle Isaiah Nichols is 4th and Eric Gregory is 12th if added to the Big 12 as pass rushers. Their starting defensive tackles don't have much pass rushing ability on tape, but starting defensive end Trey Williams is ranked 6th if added to the Big 12. Avoid passing downs and you don't have to worry about the pass rush as often. Overall, Arkansas's defensive ability comes from their coordinator, Barry Odom. He's tricky, aggressive, and willing to use unique schemes to achieve his goals. The major goal for Texas's offense is to stay on schedule. Getting behind in downs allows Odom to use that drop 8 defense, so pound the ball against their less than stellar defensive line, while controlling the linebackers with play-action fakes to limit their aggression. Once the run game gets going, pass to whatever side of the field Jalen Catalon isn't on. Arkansas and Texas have loosely similar motivations coming into this game. It's 2 storied programs that have been performing poorly the past few years. Both teams are weary and eager to find the coach that can lead them back to the promised land. Arkansas had it worse with several 2-win seasons, and it takes a lot to believe in yourself after a rough go like that. Arkansas struggled with nerves from their quarterback and wide receivers against Rice. Can they rise to the occasion, or will the moment get on top of them? Arkansas played several teams close last year, so that first wave of confidence should be arriving soon, trailed by thousands of loyal fans with a disdain for the Texas Longhorns. And we are left with the same question on our side. Are the Longhorns finally ready to take the next step and win decisively against a raucous crowd in Arkansas? At the end of the day, I think Texas proves successful with our running back depth against an average defensive line. PK's defense is designed to confuse quarterbacks, and KJ Jefferson has a long way to go on the read side of things. But if Odom can slow down our young offense, and Bryles can get Treylon Burks, Traylon Smith, and KJ Jefferson going, it could be a long night. I'm excited to watch the guys head into a rough environment because this will show us a lot about the team's current mindset under Sarkisian. If we leave Arkansas 2-0, then I really like our chances this season. And thanks for watching. Watch more of my videos here and consider joining as a channel member. As always, hook 'em.